We're just gonna quickly model with you a simple brick to show you how the features work, the extrusion and the voids. And later on, Yanis will take on with you the task to prepare everything for your file before we actually start with your own 3D key junction. That's great. Alright, we're gonna just model a simple brick with you at first to just show you how the functions of Revit work. If we move to 3D, quite useful thing, if you're modeling, you have an option right here in one corner to show working plane, so you know exactly where you are when you're gonna model. And then it shows up with a plane like this. Second button to set the work plane on which you're gonna work. So let's use it. Let's make sure that it's set to level 0. Let's hit OK. So that's where you're gonna model. Simple Danish brick, meaning 228 millimeters by 108 and a height of 54. We're gonna use a component model in place to model every single element of the 3D key junction. So if you can hit drop down onto... You don't have a level 0. You have level 1 and 2. Level 1 and 2, yeah? Yeah, you got that? It's because of difference of template. You probably have a US template, I got UK template, therefore the difference. So whether it's level 1 or 2, it doesn't really matter. We're gonna set them up individually later anyway. So it's just a matter that we're on a sort of same page. Okay, so let's drop down the component window and let's hit on model in place. That's gonna be the function that we'll use to model the whole 3D key junction. If we click on it, we get a pop-out of family, category, and the parameters. So we just use what sort of, we just categorize the element that we're gonna create. So let's say that it's gonna be something like, it's gonna be wall related. So let's go and click some category like walls. When we click OK, it shows up to name our object. So we're just gonna hit and write brick, very creative. And hit OK. So now, right now, we are inside of modeling interface. As you can see, the ribbon switched out to show us a few functions to create. First, additive way and subtractive way with the voids. So to create a simple brick, we're gonna use an extrusion function. So let's click on the extrusion button. And it's gonna move us to a ribbon that shows an options to create lines inside of our sketch. So we're in a sketch mode right now, as you can see, because of the changed color of the ribbon. So let's create a simple rectangle. Let me zoom in because it's quite big. And change maybe a scale so the lines are smaller. Let me zoom in. And let's create a simple rectangle. And we're gonna edit the dimensions of the rectangle to get the size of the brick. So let's click on one side of the sketch, then on the temporary line, and let's put in 228, the length of the brick. Then let's click on the second line right here. If you can't get the line, just hit tab button a few times so it just cycles through stuff. And let's click on the temporary dimension and let's put in 108 to get the size of the brick. Oh, sorry, I'll put it down. Alright, when we get a sketch, we get a few information. How the sketch looks like and what we can do. We can either accept it or decline it. Of course, we're gonna accept it. And after accepting it, it's gonna create a 3D object from that sketch. Usually a default height of it is 250. You can see it in a properties panel on the left side with the extrusion start, extrusion ends. You can either control it by putting it a direct number value inside of the properties panel, or by adjusting it just with one of the handles of the sketch. But to make an accurate modeling, we're gonna mostly use the option with the properties to get the proper height. So let's put in 54, the standard Danish brick size, and you can see the sketch changing, the object changing to the size that we want. Important fact, how to navigate also inside of the 3D because of the planes. If you click on the model or the object itself and orbit over it, it's gonna take this one as a center. And you can do the same using this cube. Whether you're gonna click on any of sides of the cube, corners, to get flat image or 3D image. Alright, that is a simple extrusion of a brick. It doesn't look like brick yet, so we're gonna apply a material later on to it. But first of all, let's create another extrusion, which is going to be a mortar under and on the side of the brick. So it will actually make sense. We're still inside of the model in place option. As you can see, we can either finish model or cancel model, stay inside of it. I will move to the create tab. And when you're gonna use another extrusion. And maybe to create that extrusion, I'm gonna move into one of elevations. Let me check whether it's gonna be east side. Okay, then we can move to the east side. I'm gonna change the scale as well to make the lines shorter, smaller. If we move to the elevation, we can see the brick from the side just like in 3D, but by default we're gonna have a plane which is perpendicular to the object. So if we zoom in, so we created first 3D object, brick, and applied dimension that we wanted to it. And now we're gonna create the mortar for the same object. It's gonna be the same principle, we're just gonna use different plane to do that. So as I said, the easy way to do it, to get the proper plane of modeling, because we want to model from a side of the brick, is to use one of the elevations in the project browser. When you drop down the elevation and choose the east one, for example, or the east one or north one, for example, it's make sure that you get the longer side of the brick. I'm gonna change the scale to make the line appear a little bit thinner, so it's more visible. Alright, we should be still inside of the model in place. If you're not, if you hit the check mark, just click on the object, and right here is gonna show up button edit in place, and you're back inside of that edit mode. Wait, you should be at this point still inside of the in place editor, so you should have a check mark. If you accidentally accepted it, right, then you can still click on the object, and then here will show up option to edit in place to go back into that mode. So if everyone is at this moment, at this place, we're gonna move again to the create tab, and we're gonna create another extrusion to create the mortar for the brick. And it's gonna ask us for the plane that we want to use to create the mortar. So you can either, you get three options. You can name the plane and choose one of the from the drop-down windows. Those two is gonna be, of course, horizontal ones because these are levels. So we don't want either of those. You can pick a plane. So you can use one of the object sites to do it. Or you can pick a line in which the line was sketched and it's gonna be set as your plane. We're gonna go for pick a plane. So we're gonna pick one of the sides of the objects that we already created to use as a work plane. So let's choose this option, and after we hit OK, the plane is set. We can click in here in the work plane show. Okay, I want to set it. I didn't click it, I'm sorry. So again, if we got a drop down of the set, you can also click here if you missed something. There's an option to set it again. We're gonna click on it, pick a plane. And I didn't click the side that I wanted to use a plane. So right now we have an option to hover over any faces of the elements. to choose the plane. You see, if I hover over the brick, it starts highlighting the sides of the brick. So we're gonna click on it, and it's gonna be set as our plane. If I move to Create tab again, you're gonna have those options as I mentioned before to show the plane. If you unclick it, it's gonna disappear. If you click it, the little blue rectangle is gonna show up. You can make it bigger so it doesn't, if you click on it, you can make it bigger so it doesn't really go into your way when you're modeling.
I can't click on the side.
I can only choose one of the sides. I cannot choose the entire.
Yeah, just choose the brick, the side of the brick. Click on the face of the brick.
I can't. I can click on the top line or blue line.
It's not highlighted when I.
So then you make a tab. If you click that, it starts scrolling through the options to select, right? Because you hover over a line, so it either wants you to select a line, or you can select a face, you click tab, and you see that the whole face is.
So you need to do that every time.
Usually, sometimes it will just get to the point where you want it to be. Sometimes it doesn't, so you have to scroll through it. So if you get the face that you want, you just click on it, and the plane is set in the place that you want. Guys, if you have troubles with selecting the face, Revit has an option. If you hover over one of the lines and start clicking tab, it will start scrolling through the options that you can select. So since I got three sort of objects in the same place, a line, a face, and the work plane, if I start clicking tab, right now it's highlighting face, it's moving to the work plane, as you can see, it's getting highlighted, and now it's moving to the line. So each click of the tab is gonna move you to another option that you can select. Alright, since we got a work plane set up already, we're gonna try to model the mortar. We'll put it on the bottom of the brick and one of the sides of the brick. So later on we can just copy paste the brick and we're gonna have a running bond. Okay, so let's move to the Create tab, and the principle is gonna be pretty much the same. We click Extrusion, and it's gonna ask us to create a sketch of the extrusion that we want. So we're gonna go to the extrusion. Right now I'm inside of that mode. If someone is not, then go to Create tab and click Extrusion. And you're gonna move to the contextual tab with Modify, Create Extrusion, and we have plenty of options how to model. Line, rectangle, etc. And we're gonna choose line, make sure that it's a line. And we're gonna try to sketch in the shape of the mortar around the brick. So let's start with the left corner. We're just gonna create a little line. And by Danish standard, the mortar is 12 mm thick. Alright, so we're gonna, when you start sketching, you click one point and you get the line. And right now you can put in a value that you want the line to be long, as how long the line you want to be. So we're just gonna put in a direct value of 12, right? And we hit enter, and it creates the line which is gonna be 12 mm long. I'm gonna zoom in here. All right. So, excuse me. Just 12. It's gonna go into the direction that you point at. If I point this way and I'm gonna put 12, it's gonna create a line this way. If I'm gonna point this way and put 12, it's gonna create a line this way. Let me delete it. I'm gonna use the line again. And we go from that point. It's 228 millimeters plus 12 millimeters of mortar, giving up to 240 millimeters. You can either use your mouse to get the value, or you can put in a direct value using your keyboard. 240. Hit enter. And a second way to create a sketch using a line is you have plenty of options here. This line, for these options, for example, pick lines. Let's click on this one, this little green line in the option tab. And what it does, that you can basically use existing lines to create a new line, meaning that we can use this object to create a sketch for our mortar. So if you hover over any element, you can see that it's gonna start highlighting the lines that we can pick. If you click on the line, it's gonna create the line in a sketch. So we don't have to create it by ourselves. We can use already existing one. So we're gonna create the one on the bottom and the one on the side, just by clicking on it using the option pick line. When we're at this point, we can either model it by normal line, or we can still use a pick line even though we can't really pick the line, simply because we have an option of offset, meaning that we can pick a line, but the line that we create is gonna be a certain distance that we specify from the object that we click on. Meaning, if you click on the pick line and you put in an offset of 12 millimeters, and you start hovering over any of those lines, you're gonna see that even though you pick this line, it's gonna want to create the line with the dashed line. That's where the line is gonna be placed because of the offset. So let's hover over this line and make sure that we wanna get it on the right side of the line. When you click it, it's gonna be created. Yeah, all right. So we're just gonna finish off our sketch because we got a few holes. Using normal line on the top to create that little line. And we can either also use line here to cover it up to make sure that the sketch is closed. Or if I just go back, there's also an option that is quite useful during any kind of sketching. It's right here, it's called Extrusion Tree. How do you close it? You just draw a line, you make sure that the line is continuous. So you can either draw a line, or in this case, there's a very useful option that's gonna come quite handy in many situations. In the Modify tab in here, you have an option which is called Trim Extend to Corner. Oh yeah? If you click on it, you can see a preview what it does. If he clicks this wall, he clicks this wall, and then it gets the corner right. So if you click on this one, and we need to get two lines that we want to meet together. And we can click on the one on the bottom, because right here we have a hole that we want to fill out. We can click the line on the bottom, and we can click the line on the side. And after we click it, you can see that it trims the corner, it extends it to the point that we specified. Yeah, we're gonna go again. I'm gonna undo that. If you click on the option of extrusion, we click the line on the bottom, we click the line on the right, and it extrudes to the corner. So the sketch is now fully defined, closed, meaning that we can accept it, and we're gonna get the object that we want. So if we click on the green check mark, finish edit mode, we're gonna get that extrusion right. Oh yeah, we got the mortar. If we switch to the 3D view now, either using Project Browser in 3D views, double clicking it, or using this icon on the top to open a 3D view, we're gonna see something like that. You see that it got extruded in the other way that we wanted it to be extruded. If we click on it, we have an option to either specify it, the extrusion ends and start, or simply in this case, what's going to be very easy for us, we can use one of those handles to move it around. And you can see that as I hover over the object, it starts snapping to the side. I'm going to zoom in on this one. You see it starts to highlight and a little line is created. That it means that it's going to get the dimension equal to this one. So if I let it go, it's going to trim it exactly to that place. And we're going to do the same thing with the second part of the extrusion. Well, if you have it highlighted, you click on the handle that you want to move, and you drag it to that place where it's going to stick to the face of the brick. And you let it go. And it gets trimmed to that way, to that face. All right, so we got a brick with mortar, but it doesn't really look like a brick. Are you still in that place? I see. Okay, so how to make sure that it's with the faces of the brick? Okay, so in the 3D view, you have those handles, right? You can see those blue handles. You click on the handle and then you can move it. Okay, you all exited the model in place editor. So you have to double click the family. Yeah, and you should be inside of the model editor now. You should be able to click the separate. Yeah, okay, perfect. And now you can edit the handles. Alright, so we click on the object and use the handles to put together to be at the same place where the brick face is. Alright, so we have a brick, but we do not really have materials applied to it. So we're gonna do it now, so it looks like an actual brick. How to do that? You click on the object. In this case, we have two objects. So let's first click on the brick. And in the properties panel, on the left side or right side, depending on where you placed it, we have an option, materials and finishes. It's gonna steer the whole material feature. So if you click, by default it says by category, meaning that it's just generic gray to show that it's an actual object, that it's pretty. If you click on it, it should show up a little rectangle with 3 dots, meaning that there's a window that you can open. So we're gonna click on that little rectangle with 3 dots, and a window with material choose should show up. Everyone got it?
Yeah.
And right now, Zhao should upload to your fronter a folder with materials that I would love you to download. If someone can check a fronter if the folder is available.
Yeah, it's not internet. It's very bad in here.
Excuse me?
Internet.
Oh, the internet. You have a problem with internet?
It's down.
Oh yeah. Okay, then we're just gonna use materials which are inside of the Revit, and later on we're just gonna show you how to import a custom textures. Okay. I prepared a texture for you with brick, but we're gonna have to use something that is inside of the Revit. Yeah. There's a couple of materials you can see. You can scroll through the list, and you're gonna get a lot of default materials that's already predefined by Revit. And you got some bricks, but these are mostly bricks which are gonna be used for walls, meaning that it's the whole bond. And we just have one brick, and we want that texture to be on one brick. So in this case, you either Google for a texture which is only one brick, or you try to cut it out, I don't know, even using paint to get the size of the brick. Or in this case, I would rather have you create a new material, and we're just gonna give a color to that material to sort of look like a brick, okay? So you're gonna have option in the lower corner of that asset window, a little sphere with a plus. If you click on it, you have an option to create a new material. Okay, so we create a new material. You can see a new material shows up with a default name and a lot of options to choose from. We're gonna click on the identity tab. And we're just gonna change the name of the material to know what we are modeling and what this material is gonna be. So you're just gonna put in a, I don't know, 3D key junction brick, whatever. This is only information, so it doesn't really apply any materials to it. So you can put, it doesn't really matter what you put into those values. The tab that we are interested in is the one called appearance. Because in here it's contained all of the textures, all of the colors that we're gonna see applied to the brick. It's just a generic one. We got a few options how to do it. As I say, we can import a texture, or we can use something that is inside of the Revit already. Or in this case, we're just gonna add a color to it because Revit doesn't contain a single brick texture. So if you click on the color, you can just specify the color that you want. So I'm gonna go with something that is yellowish. Yeah, we have plenty of other options. Image fade, meaning how much of the image that, if we got one, will be displayed on the texture, how much glossiness is gonna be applied to it, and a lot of other options that you can scroll through. Most of them are not really relevant and not so important for the model to look good. I guess if you stick to the textures and the colors, it will be great anyway. So we can go with very basic and get a really good look out of it. So if you chose your own color, you can click OK, and you can see that the material displays that this one that we created is applied, and if we unhighlight it, I'm in shaded mode, excuse me. In here, on the bottom, you have an option, visual style, shaded with edges. If you click on it, you're gonna get few options how the model will be displayed. It can be a wireframe, meaning that you're gonna see through it. It can be hidden line, meaning that you're gonna see only that can meet an eye, meaning the lines behind it won't be visible. A shaded one, that's what we've been into. Consistent colors is the same one, just without the shadowing. And the last one, realistic, is the ones when the texture will show up. So if we click to the realistic view, we're gonna see the materials applied to the brick. Oh yeah. So if we have material applied to the brick, we're gonna do the same thing with the mortar. We're gonna click on the mortar, go to the materials and finishes, and we're gonna click that rectangle again. And the window should pop out again, and we're gonna create a new material. A new material is created, so we're gonna do the same thing. We're just gonna rename it to something that is to something that makes sense, and we're just gonna call it mortar. If we switch to the appearance tab, I'm gonna show you a second way to apply material to it. Meaning that we could either choose color, a texture that we import, or we can use something that is already inside of the Revit files. Right here, lower corner, you have an option to open, close asset browser. If you click on this little button, a new window will open up. It's asset browser. It's every material asset that is available inside of the Revit by default, both appearance, physical, and thermal, meaning that you got plenty of options to choose from. We're gonna stick to the appearance library. We're gonna skip the physical one because we're only interested in the appearance. And you can use a search. You can use a search function to find something that you want, and you can just drop down the window and choose from all of the categories that you want. We're gonna look for something that is looking like mortar. So I'm just gonna put a mortar, and we can see if it will find something that is interesting to us. And you can see that it's showed us a couple of materials, couple of assets, and that might come handy for us. So let's just say that I'm gonna pick this one for the mortar. So I just double click it, close the window, and it's gonna be right here. Oh, it's actually not a mortar. So we're gonna do it again. We're gonna open the assets and maybe look for something that looks like concrete. So I'm gonna scroll for concrete. Cast in place, for example. And we're just gonna choose whatever you like. I'm just gonna choose something that looks like mortar concrete. So you're just gonna double click one of those assets, close the window again, and you see that it's applied here. And also, if you have a texture, you can still apply a color to it, to most of them at least. Meaning that even though it's a texture, we can still change the color of it. If you click on it, we can make it darker, for example. And in the preview, it's gonna start showing darker. I want to make it super dark, so it looks like a darker motor. And I'm gonna click OK to apply it. Yeah. So we're getting another texture. Two ways of putting in a texture inside of the model. Alright, this was a simple way how to create an object inside of Revit. We use two extrusions to do that and apply the materials in two different ways. If we click on a finish model, it's gonna get us out. I'm just gonna cancel this one. It's gonna get us out of the modeling option, and you can see that those both extrusions will now work as one model, so it's not gonna be separated. Okay, guys. So there was two simple ways to apply materials, meaning you can either give a color to it, or you can choose an asset from Revit. There's a third way. I think it's the best way to give the materials to. I wanted you to use a texture that we found with Yanis to use for the model, but the internet is down apparently, so we can't download it. But still, I'm gonna show you how to do it. If you open up the material options again, and I'm gonna change the existing material already, and go to the appearance tab. You can see that it's written here that no image is selected, in this case at least, or in the case of mortar. In mortar, it's an image supplied from Revit. So I'm gonna switch back to the brick. And if you click on this no image selected, it's actually gonna point you, open a window, and it's gonna ask you to specify a texture that you want. So meaning that you can import a custom texture inside of Revit and use it as your texture. You can browse your files. I'm just gonna quickly to browse something inside of my computer. I got a brick right here, for example. I don't know whether it's a normal brick or side of the brick. Yeah, that's just a normal brick, so I'm gonna try to find something else. I prepared a texture for you that you should find on the front if the internet is gonna be up. And it's called side of the brick, meaning that I just cut out one brick from the texture, so I can apply the material to the brick. So I opened the texture inside of the material assets, specified the direction that it's placed on, and accepted it. It's working. Right, so you just choose the image that you want, and it's gonna show up inside of that window. And if you click OK, it will apply the material that you want. But you can see that it's sort of distorted, that it's moved in a wrong place. So what can you do with your texture if it's not in the way you want it to be? You can go to Appearance tab, and now if you click on the image itself, you have plenty of options to edit the texture itself, meaning that you can edit size of it, like a scale. This texture was, for example, prepared in a standard brick dimension width and height. So meaning that the height would be 54 millimeters. And if I just uncheck this one to get rid of the constraints, and 228, you can see that I can manipulate the texture to extend it to the proper size that I wanted it to be. Other option that's going to be useful, a position, meaning that you can position a texture, because in Revit, each texture is not based on the object, it's based on the origin point of the file, meaning that you can specify it's repetitive, the texture, as you can see, that it's sort of repeating itself. So you can specify how much moved according to the origin of the file the texture will be. It's more of a trial and error thing. So if you don't see the texture right, you try to change something in the position. If it's still not right, you change it again. As much as you want, depends how ambitious you are, getting the right size of the texture. And you can see that the side of it is gonna be more or less correct, but the top of it, because it's different side, it's still applied by a different way. What you can do in this way, you can use the second option to apply material. I'm gonna create a new material. Actually, I'm gonna go to the directory. I'm just gonna duplicate it. Right click on the material, duplicate. I'm just gonna change the size of the texture that I just did. I need to duplicate the asset. Important thing, guys, that if two materials will use the same asset, you can see an asset name here, and the amount of material, additional material that is using this asset. If you change the asset in here, well, I'm just gonna change something like that. It's also gonna change for this one. So make sure that you create a multiple materials that they don't use the same asset, because then if you change one, the other one will be also changed. Now to do that, you got also an option here to duplicate this asset. When that will create a new one, you can see that 0 elements is currently using this asset. Okay, I'm just gonna change the size of it. It's gonna be 228 by 108 millimeters is the size of the brick. If you add in the texture, now it should show up like this. But if I go to modify, you have an option to paint it by face inside of the modify tab. Is the second option that I told you, that I showed you in the presentation, that you can either apply material to the whole object, you can apply it by face or by region. So you have option to paint, and there's a preview of how it works. That you can also do. Okay, when you click on the paint one, it's gonna open this asset browser again. I'm just gonna choose the material that I want, and then you just choose the face that you want. Either of those. You can see that it's gonna change. And then you can specify the size again of the texture to match the face that you want, to get the proper look of it on the object. So multiple ways of applying the materials. You can play around a little bit with those, and trust me, using custom texture that you're gonna get from the internet is, I think, the best way to get a good look out of 3D junctions, because you can find very realistic textures on the internet.